Liverpool FC's former CEO Peter Moore has founded a new soccer club in Santa Barbara, California. Peter has had leading roles at companies such as Reebok and Microsoft, as well as EA Sports' hugely popular FIFA game. In this episode of The Soccer Business, find out what Peter has learned from his business career and his time at Liverpool, and how those experiences are now informing his work in building a brand new club which will play in the USL Championship next season. So Peter, thanks very much indeed for joining the Soccer Business podcast. Why do you want to start a USL club in California?
Well, I came back from Liverpool, Simon, during the end of the COVID season, and pretty quickly, two things happened. Rob McElhaney shows up at my house and tries to lure me back to the UK immediately to help them with Wrexham. I was born and bred in Liverpool, but my dad, who owned a pub, moved us to Wrexham when I was 10 years of age and kind of grew up in Wrexham. And so not too far away from Liverpool, but far enough away to have a completely different life. And then secondly, the good folks at USL figured out that the former Liverpool CEO was now residing in Santa Barbara, a market that they had been working on for the previous year, and so key to their West Coast expansion. Up and down, you think about where Santa Barbara sits on the West Coast, between Los Angeles, San Francisco. Obviously, Monterey Bay was already in place, as was Orange County Soccer, Fresno, but Santa Barbara was going to be key. So I said, yes, I will. I'll be an engaged minority owner, were my exact words. And a few months later, I'm diving in with both feet and getting really involved in building out the club. Literally, Simon, from a clean sheet of paper. And the game has been so good to me, both at the personal and professional level. I went to my first game in 1959 at Anfield, and the game has been so important to me. And you get to that point in your life where you feel like you can give back, and the power of the game. And certainly, my 3.5 years at Liverpool, I fully understood what the game meant to millions, if not tens of millions, of people that followed the club. And I felt it was time to give back and do something with kind of a little bit of wisdom and experience that I had, and start something afresh and new for what is a phenomenal soccer community in Santa Barbara.
Yeah, I was gonna touch upon that sort of contrast between Liverpool and Santa Barbara. Obviously, very, very different places.
Oh yeah.
But your experience of being inside Liverpool Football Club and dealing with that extraordinary fan base that exists in the city and, of course, well beyond it. Do you see any possibility of creating, I'm not saying on that scale, but that kind of level of passion and engagement? What makes you think that's possible?
Yeah, I mean, the game is so powerful for so many people around the world, regardless of, race, creed, income, affluence. We all love the game. And having lived here in the States now and been involved in the game for the best part of 43 years, we're at this lightning in a bottle moment that I feel can make not only a sporting impact, but a social impact. One of the first things that we did once we got the club going was immediately form a 501c3 charity called Fundación Cielo. And my wife and I funded it, and it was the lessons we learned in Liverpool, supporting the Liverpool FC Foundation, a group called Red Neighbors, which helped all of the people around the stadium. That postcode of L4 is one of the most impoverished postcodes in the United Kingdom. Yeah. This kind of ironic juxtaposition of this kind of multi-$100 million, maybe even $1 billion stadium at this point, with $1 billion worth of talent running around, and yet the streets that surround it are still relatively impoverished. And so at Liverpool, we focused on L4, L5, L6 postcodes around the stadium. And then, I've been relatively fortunate in life and was able then to form my own foundation, the Peter Moore Foundation, a charitable foundation focused on supporting the people of Liverpool that have put me on my shoulders as a kid and given me anything that I wanted. And my Scouse personality, I think, still is pervasive today. So food insecurity, social isolation, cancer research. My mom was a nurse at Alderhay Children's Hospital, one of the great institutions still today in the UK, and taking care of young children with tragic health issues. And so we supported that as well, all through what we call the power of the badge. You walk in to a hospital, a schoolroom with an LFC logo on, and you get immediate attention. And so using that power for positivity in a world today that has never been more divisive in my 70 years on this planet. And the one thing I think we can all agree on, there's not much we can all agree on nowadays, is football. Now, our teams will differ, our view of VAR differs, our view of the referee's decision differs, but we all love the game. And the power of the game should be used for good, and that's what we see. And in Santa Barbara, a wonderful soccer community. American football hasn't been played there since 1987. It's a very diverse community that's brilliantly integrated. And we have got 30 years, basically, of soccer legacy and great people who have built the game at a youth level and a collegiate level. UCSB is where we'll be playing, national caliber team pretty much year in, year out, and a magnificent stadium, soccer-specific stadium to boot. So all of that came together, Simon, and off we go. And we're ready to play in March of 26.
March of 2026 in the USL Championship, yeah?
That is correct, yes. We had spent a couple of years building a League One platform, and then about 7 or 8 months ago, unfortunately, Memphis had a stadium issue that meant that their position was untenable, and we've stepped into the role that they've left, and the league is supporting us superbly to get there. But there's a step up that we had to do, so that pushed our inaugural season back a year. We've invested in the stadium, building that out. It's a magnificent collegiate stadium, but we need to get it to be a magnificent professional stadium. And that's what we're working on right now. We just laid down a brand new pitch. In fact, Wrexham played there last summer against Bournemouth. And so we accelerated the new pitch, natural grass field, and grandstands that come right down to the touchline, a proper soccer stadium.
Yeah, but it's also got that lovely American feel about it from the images that I've seen of the bleachers, and then from a journalist point of view, that press box where you can picture the commentator sort of calling the game from up there. That really is like how you see the American sports in the movies as well, isn't it? That.
Yeah, and from that press box, if you look to the side, you can see the beach, the Pacific Ocean, the swaying palm trees. So it's very Santa Barbarian, and it's a magnificent location in a great school, and in a community that couldn't be more excited. We're at 1,300 season ticket deposits already without really trying, and I think we're in great shape for being one of the preeminent teams in the championship next year.
Yeah, I mean, the Championship's an interesting division, isn't it, in terms of the markets that are in it, because it's a huge difference, really, between those two leagues that you were looking at in a lot of ways. But you're going to be up against, cities as big as Detroit and Indianapolis and so on. You're coming into an environment there where it's not just local soccer; it's a national league, and you're going to have to be competitive as well. So did that change a lot in terms of like the budget you needed to be looking at for the playing staff and so on?
Oh yeah, you need to up your game. You're playing Sacramento Republic, you're playing Oakland Roots. Now you play, Las Vegas Lights. You're playing Orange County Soccer Club. It's a big step up, but it is something that we feel we can do. We feel the community can carry us, and we've got, with the promotion relegation, which I'm sure we'll talk about, announcement. As any club, we think about promotion, we don't think about relegation. So we do have that opportunity to step up even further and support the league as they go Division One to basically go neck to neck with MLS, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, it is an interesting one, that. We'll get into that in a bit. But I was just thinking, in terms of the challenges that you've had, because you started this idea a few years ago, yeah? In terms of the challenges of getting to the stage where you're 1 year out, less than 1 year out from taking the field, having people buying tickets, going to your stadium and all the rest of it. The journey, there's obviously an immense amount of work to be done in that year, I would imagine, but also to get to this point. What were some of the hurdles you've had to overcome, if you had any?
Well, the first real hurdle was the league had started to negotiate with Santa Barbara City College, a magnificent location, literally right on the beach, but an artificial turf surface, football lines, and football coach was not about to lift his lines off or take the goalposts down. A track around the field itself, so that was pushing the fans further away from the action, which I wasn't a huge fan of, but we proceeded down there. Bluntly, Simon, in the end, it was very clear that college did not want us there. They didn't want professional sports there. We spent a lot of time and effort doing that. And then I moved my attention to probably where I should have been in the first place, which is UCSB, which is a little out of town, 10, 15 minutes from downtown, but a soccer-specific stadium, like I say, natural grass, filled to the rafters. It's 17,000 fans. That is where ultimately we should have started. And even that took a long time. You're dealing with the University of California system. You've got to be able, they'd never done anything this before. And without the support of the athletic director, Kelly Barsky, who was a huge advocate and is a huge advocate of the game of soccer. She's a soccer mom. In these instances, you need advocates. You need people who believe in you to break through the red tape and the bureaucracy. And we were able to do that. But it took us a year and a half of negotiations to be the first major third-party tenant on that campus ever. And we've worked our way through that. And the league has been incredibly supportive in helping us with funding, improvements to the stadium. We're going to be ready to go, as I say. But there were things that we needed to, one after the other, to beat down. During all of that, my wife and I have funded it independently to get everything going, and as well, starting to engage with local communities, and I took some lessons fundamentally from my Liverpool days. When I left Liverpool, I look back on what it was that I did. And, I've just finished my autobiography, which will be out this fall, and it documents a good chunk of that. Well, obviously about my football life and Liverpool especially. But, when I arrived there, it was this period where football organizational structures at the highest level were undergoing this change as sporting directors coming in, the role of the CEO and the manager more likely being the head coach. All of that was going on. And so as I got on the plane and left to head back to California, I started thinking about what did I do? And it all boiled down to what I'll call the 4 C's. It was about community, about civic, about commercial, and about culture. And those were the things that I focused on at Liverpool, whilst our sporting director, Michael Edwards, did a brilliant job in building the squad, while Jurgen Klopp did his work as fundamentally the head coach. And we, at the business end of the stick, made sure that they didn't have to worry about anything other than winning games. And so I took some of those lessons to Santa Barbara, and that's what we started to focus on, was those 4 C's. And so far, so good. That has laid the foundation for what I think will be a successful club starting next year.
Yeah, I mean, one of those C's, we did an earlier podcast with a chap called Michael Hitchcock in Texas, who's launched about 20 clubs in the lower division space in America. And he talked a lot about community marketing or community work, which isn't really big M marketing, but serves a purpose while you're doing it. How have you found that area? It's obviously you talked about the community you worked in Liverpool, different context you're in now. How have you found that community's been receptive, and what kind of things are you going to be doing to sort of lure them to become more and more engaged with the club?
They've been incredibly receptive. You look at what you do as a marketer, you look at your demographic. Who is it we need to appeal to, and what do we need to tell them, and how do we support them? And I always remember, there's 2 things I remember from being at Liverpool. There's 2 banners on the Kop. One says, football without fans is nothing. And the other one says, unity is strength. And when you take those messages, and so I spent a lot of time in the first year of getting this thing going, sitting down with community members, bring them to my house, in particular the Hispanic community, inviting them all over, the people that have helped, that have put the game on their shoulders in Santa Barbara over the last 30 years, bring into my house, explaining what we were doing, what we intend to build, how we would engage with the community. And then doing community outreach, whether it's Chamber of Commerce or Visit Santa Barbara, or going into groups and me speaking about what this game means and how we can provide support for younger players who are being priced out right now of being able to play the game that we all love. And that's a real issue, and offering scholarships. And we have a wonderful youth organization, a very prominent youth organization, Santa Barbara Soccer Club, 3,500 players, with a huge catchment area up and down the central coast of California. So many of those kids can't afford to play. Club soccer, as you know, can be really expensive, particularly if you're playing at the highest level and you're jumping on planes every other weekend to go play in tournaments and away games. And so providing scholarship opportunities for young players, which ultimately turns out to be from Hispanic families, from disadvantaged families who are have imbued their love of the game into their sons and daughters. But man, $8,000 a year to go play and get the uniforms and pay for coaching and jump on planes to go to tournaments, is really expensive and is out of their reach. And so you build scholarship programs and all of that to make sure that the game is not out of the reach of anybody because of any financial challenges. And reaching out in particular, as I say, to the Hispanic community, who form such an important part, both of the legacy of the game in Santa Barbara, as well as the future of the game in Santa Barbara. And that's been a key part of what we've been doing.
Interesting. Yeah. You mentioned the pro rel thing, and there's a lot going on in the USL space at the moment, isn't there? If you look a little bit lower down at USL 2 and USL 1, there's new teams coming on board. People are spending serious money to build, 10,000 seater stadiums in places that you wouldn't expect to see soccer specific stadiums. You wouldn't have expected 5 or 10 years ago. It is quite a fascinating situation at the moment. What did you think about the two big decisions that USL have made in the last few months to start the goal of starting a Division 1 league to compete effectively with MLS in that tier of soccer, and also to introduce promotion and relegation?
Both courageous moves, Simon. Let's be fair, but moves that need to happen. And I see USL as a proper football league. Let's call it that way, which is community focused. Is it in the big splashy media markets yet of Los Angeles or New York? Does it take a classically American sports franchise model? Does it require 30, 40,000 seater stadiums and multi-tens of millions of dollars budget? No. Is it focused on, let's call them, with no disrespect, the B markets, the markets where the game actually flourishes at a grassroots level, and there's a huge demand to see top-class soccer in those communities. And look, it's America. B-level markets could be 2 million people, instead of the 15 or 20. And it's not like back home in England. But what we have seen is, I've lived here. I've been involved in the game since 1981. I actually came over in the 70s and coached in Ohio, and I was a physical education teacher back in England. But every summer I would come over. I've watched the game evolve, and I've been involved in it either professionally or personally since the moment I landed in New York City in whatever that was, 1978. The game is at a moment in time right now that I've never seen. Whether it's Gen Z that is saying the NFL is too glitzy, I don't want to spend 3.5 hours. Baseball's too boring. Hockey's too regional. Basketball's cool, but I only need to watch the last 2 minutes. But soccer is where it's at. And, maybe it's because there's no helmets and there's no padding, and then you can see the players' faces, and it's global and players come from all over the world. Maybe it's Ted Lasso. Maybe it's Welcome to Wrexham. Maybe it's Leo Messi in Inter Miami. Maybe it's NBC doing such a spectacular job with Premier League. Maybe it's because we see so much soccer now. And when I came to this country, there was zero. The scores weren't even in the newspapers. And on Sunday morning, I had to save up enough nickels, dimes, and quarters to call my dad to find out what the score was. And I knew I had 2 minutes to get the score, who scored, and that was it. And fast forward to today, and it's not cheap. Paramount Plus, Peacock, ESPN Plus, you name it, right? But we see every game. We see absolutely every game. Yeah. And look, today I'm on the West Coast, so noon it's Arsenal versus Real Madrid, and you got all of these opportunities to see the top class game that we never had when I first came here. And I think the young people can relate to that more. Secondly, for me, as a former USSF licensed coach to make some money in my early years here, we always said once these kids grow up and have their own kids and they've got some knowledge of the game, and that they're not being introduced to the game at first as adults, but they played all their lives, and now they can imbue that experience to their kids growing up. I think that's where we're at. It's a multi-generational thing now that's coming through, that you go stand on the sidelines, and in the old days you just hear kick it, and now you're hearing get back, hold the line. You're hearing intelligent input from coaches and parents, because they played the game themselves all the way through, in some instances all the way through collegiately. So this has taken decades, and I've been fortunate to be involved in it in decades and watched it. And we're at this moment in time, particularly, we're only a few months away from the Club World Cup here. And of course, we've got the World Cup next year. And it is an amazing time for the game in this country. And I think that's what you're seeing, not just for the big media markets, which we've had since MLS came about in the mid-90s, but those, and again, I don't want to disrespect them by calling them secondary markets, but the communities in these cities are saying, we want to see top-class soccer, and we're willing as communities to pay for it. We're willing to build stadiums because we recognize that, old football stadiums repurposed, which is what we had to live with in the 70s and 80s. And even with MLS in the 90s, it was primarily NFL owners who are looking for a secondary tenant in their stadiums, right, to be able to monetize their stadiums in a better way. Well, now, to your point, soccer-specific stadiums are here to stay, and they're cropping up every week. You hear an announcement, and it's primarily at the USL level where you're seeing those announcements.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it is a fascinating moment in time. I mean, through all that involvement, did you have other opportunities? You must have had people ask you, with your success in business and your involvement in the game, did you want to get involved with an MLS club or so on? Did you have other opportunities to get on board?
I came back from Liverpool. I immediately was contacted by my former boss at EA, Electronic Arts, to go. He was at Unity, which is a game engine, huge game engine company that also builds out real-time 3D to help him build out sports and live entertainment using, long story, volumetric capture, which is the utilization of cameras to ingest data to turn out and churn out interactive images. Long story, but and I was fascinated. I'm always up for learning new things, and I did that for a couple of years, and then Santa Barbara Sky FC came along, and I realized, I've got to put all of my free time and attention to get this thing up and running. Yeah, I mean, the people are always, to this day, can you come help us here? Can you come do this? But this was, you've got to get focused. And I once I was committed, there was no way I could be doing other things on the side.
The Wrexham thing is interesting. I mean, you must have been, curious about that one, maybe to get involved in that, but also just to see how it's resonated with people over here. The conversations I find, absolutely bizarre to be having in a lot of ways, where people who are watching that series, especially a couple of years ago when it first got going, and they're talking to you about these players and these clubs that you think, like, how on earth do you know about these things? I mean, I felt it all the time. Being from Burnley, I used to just, my standard response when talking to people was, "Oh, I'm from near Manchester." And now I say to people, I'm from Burnley, and they know what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
But the Wrexham thing has caught an imagination here in some way. It kind of connects a bit with the pro-rel thing as well, maybe. I don't know. But it's something different than American sport, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it does connect with the pro-rel thing, because Americans will tell you they learned about promotion and relegation, the ups and downs, by watching Welcome to Wrexham. So, as I alluded to, my dad, when I was 10, got a pub just outside of Wrexham. And, I was already playing by then. I was going to an all boys, somehow past my 11 plus. I to this day, I don't know how I did that, but I ended up at an all boys grammar school. But I would either be playing, or if Wrexham were playing. And in those days, Simon, you go to the race course. I'm talking where am I? late 60s, early 70s. Wrexham are getting 18, 19,000 at the race course. At the end of the season, the home nations tournament, which doesn't exist anymore, but England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland would play. And there was always a game at the racecourse. England would come to the racecourse, and these were blood and thunder games by the end of the year. Wales versus England, and the Wrexham manager John Neal was superb and put together superb teams that I can name from goalkeeper to left wing to this day, that we would go if I couldn't get to see Liverpool, or if I wasn't playing for Gresford Athletic, which is you see featured in the Welcome to Wrexham series. So, I had this thing, and so I'm a Wrexham. I played for Wrexham senior schoolboys. I was a pretty decent right full back, good enough to play representative soccer. Played at the racecourse several times. So as I'm, fast forward, I don't know, 50 years, and everybody knows Wrexham here in America. It is bizarre to me. I just shake my head. I still can't get over it, and I go home all the time. My family, my brothers and sisters and nephews and nieces still live in Wrexham, and go home. And I'll go watch Wrexham play. And I've stayed in contact with Rob McElhaney. I helped them as an advisor for the first 6 months of them getting up and running. Rob explained to me, and I'm sure you heard this, during lockdown, he turns on Netflix, and he'd been playing FIFA with his boys. So he was aware of me as president of EA Sports, and started watching Sunderland Till I Die. And he will tell you the story that, he said, this is Philadelphia. I don't know where Sunderland is, but this is Philadelphia. This is the agony of being somewhere that is a big sports city that is futile in their ability to meet the expectations of a rabid fan base. And he'd never met Ryan Reynolds, and tells me that they'd had a text relationship and basically said, hey, we're buying a football team. And Ryan, okay, we are, a type thing. And he saw the power, as we started off this conversation, the power of what the game can do to bring good, to bring hope, to bring joy to a downtrodden community that's gone through rough times. And Wrexham certainly had, basically a coal mining and steelworks town, and two industries that have disappeared. And so I said, look, I can't go back. This was in weeks of me coming back, buying a home in Santa Barbara. My wife, California girl, who was my wing woman in Liverpool and loved every moment of it, is shaking her head at me in the background. She learned that the weather is shite. There's a word that you rarely hear in America, but
especially California.
Totally. She tolerated that. And we go back a lot, Sam. We still are very active there. She still teaches chair. She's a yoga teacher, chair yoga to her Scouse community every week, which she's been doing since 2017. To bring a group now that is close to 60 people strong, to give them a community, their own little community. But yeah, I wasn't going to go back, but I said, I'll help you. And I became an advisor and got them in the FIFA game, started working with people on the ground there in Wrexham I knew, educated a few people about what it was going to take. The club was still owned by a supporters trust. The club was on the verge of bankruptcy, and the supporters had gathered and passed the hat around the town and were able to keep it rolling. The university owned the stadium. So there were a lot of things, but I helped them, and still do if I'm called upon, and still enjoy going back there as best I can and watching Wrexham play. And I think it's, they're on the brink of a record-breaking third promotion in a row. And I try to watch every single game through iFollow, which is that platform where you can watch games back home. And the win at Wycombe was the turning point in the season for them. And so I'm hopeful that they can see it through for the last half a dozen games and get automatic promotion, which would be record-breaking, 3 promotions in a row.
And potential connections and experiences between your club and Wrexham there? Is there?
Well, we'll see. There could be no more two disparate communities than Wrexham in North Wales and Santa Barbara on the central coast of California. But yeah, I go back. Like I say, my family's there. They wander around town wearing their Santa Barbara Sky FC gear. I'm sure people get very jealous of that. So yeah, we've got our own. We got to focus on our own community here, and then think about broader outreach down the road.
Yeah. Those American owners, it's an interesting one. Just at a slight tangent. We've seen a huge amount of American money going into the English game at all levels now. I mean, I think it's about a third of EFL clubs have American ownership, as well as half the Premier League. Some have done it really well. I would say the two things that you've been involved in are both examples of Americans coming in and doing it the right way. But we've seen the other side of it as well, unfortunately, haven't we? What are your overall impressions of Americans coming into the English game, and sometimes maybe not getting it, or sometimes bringing something different that's been missing from English football? I mean,
well, Liverpool's a great example. You may go back to the days of Hicks and Gillette, fondly known as the Cowboys in Liverpool, who didn't. I mean, I looked at it from afar. This is 15, 16, 17 years ago now. And I looked at it from afar and I said, here's two guys that don't know what they're getting into. They're going to treat this like it's a block of flats that they're going to flip for a profit after 2-3 years. And that is not going to fly in the city of Liverpool. And Hicks and Gillette found out pretty quickly. They over-leveraged the club with debt. They made promises about putting a spade in the ground in Stanley Park to build a brand new stadium that never materialized. And fundamentally, they were run out of town. And my owners, Fenway Sports Group, who were New England Sports Ventures at that time, saw the opportunity of an incredible club with global reach, of a growing league that had huge media right opportunities, which have now come into fruition. But they also understood community and what it takes. And my boss during that period, Mike Gordon, I always said, let's never call ourselves the owners. And stewards was the word we typically use, and I think they still use. And Mike would always say, look, we don't own the club, but we have the economic rights to do business as Liverpool Football Club, and which was a clever way of describing how they do it. They're phenomenal owners that have the experience of, obviously, the Boston Red Sox, Pittsburgh Penguins in the NHL. They own New England Sports Network, so they've got this vertical element of the media up there in New England, and they get it. And they understood, every now and again, like any owners, you do some missteps of ticket pricing, or, in my period, with the furlough issue and trademark issue. I mean, it's hard with 1,000 things a day that you can put your foot in and make a mess. It's hard to look at a football and have perfect owners. And mistakes were made when I was there, and I take responsibility for those as well, which we fix. But I think American owners see this massive opportunity of a global sport with global reach, which American sports typically don't have. The media rights are immense, and they look at it and go, wait, I can lose every game and still make £100 million because Sky Sports and NBC and whomever all around the globe are paying this, and maybe get relegated, but have these parachute payments that you're going to give me to bounce back again. And so I think they see that. But I think the globalization of the sport, and they also saw the impact that it was starting to have in the United States. And so they could bring it back. And the size of the market, you see a lot of those clubs come here to the United States every summer. And the Premier League starting to put stakes in the ground here with actually then organizing the competitions that we see every summer now with clubs coming over. And so I think that's why you're seeing American ownership. And I think that the opportunity for promotion and relegation, every owner is an optimist and say, wait, I can get promoted to the next level and potentially have a bigger impact and a bigger footprint around the world. Not thinking about relegation, which can have the negative effect, obviously, but I think that's what you're seeing. I think it's been good for the game. A lot of fans don't like foreign ownership, and I understand that, but I think if the owners are right, they put the unfortunately, the necessary funding you need to put into to be competitive, and then you kind of leave it alone a little bit, and rely on your executive team on the ground to run things day to day. That generally works out. I would argue there's no better ownership group than Fenway Sports Group in English football right now.
Yeah, I think they are viewed as a model, certainly a model of how Americans, if they get involved in English football, should behave. I think that's pretty much a consensus opinion on them. It's been interesting to watch a few ownerships. I've seen it close up at Burnley as well. Come in and they're very, very enthusiastic to make an impact very quickly in that first sort of 6 months to a year, and then as they learn, it becomes a more natural process, I think, as both sides learn about each other. It's interesting. I'm conscious of time. I could talk all day about all this stuff, Peter, but I'm conscious of your time. But in a year's time now, 11 months from now, the USL 2026 season starts. You've got a home game. What's that going to be like? And what do you have to do in the next 12 months to make sure that is what you want it to be?
I'm watching with great interest clubs right now selling out their home game. And I get that. The opening game of a brand new club for a brand new season, I think you better be selling that out. You better have done your job to get the community interested. The real challenge then is how do 8-9 games in, you're mid-table. How do you keep people coming back? I'm so optimistic that the people of Santa Barbara, when I say Santa Barbara, Simon, I'm talking about maybe 100-mile swath of the Central Coast that will come, and the epicenter becomes Santa Barbara. And I think that it's such a powerful community. I want to do good. I want the club to be a bastion of community focus, to give people something to do that they can rally around on Saturday nights or whenever the games happen to be. It will lead us into the World Cup only 90 days later. And so it's going to be this huge focus on the game in the United States, in North America in 2026. And I truly hope it could be something that brings us all together in a world that couldn't be any more divisive right now. But like I said at the beginning, there's one thing we can all agree on, is that we love the game, and it brings us together either around the television, in bars, or in the stadium itself. Look, we're going to scream at each other and hurl abuse and call the other players names, but we're going to be there together, enjoying the beautiful game, and nowhere more beautiful to enjoy the beautiful game than Santa Barbara, California.
I think we'll leave it on that note. That sounds a very exciting prospect, and one I look forward to seeing the journey over the next few months and how it goes, and seeing your opening game. And it's just such an exciting thing that you can do this in America as well, isn't it? Where you can sit down with that blank sheet of paper and chart out something like this and go and do it. So all the best of luck to you with that work over the next year. And thank you very much indeed for your time joining us.
Thank you, Simon.